I can't say that there were culture shocks, but did it take getting used to? Of course, living in a different country. And also, there are some Americanisms that are kind of stuck with me that maybe don't work as much in Croatia or in Europe as I might have expected.
All right, welcome back to the podcast, everybody. On this episode, our special guest is Helenna Hercigonja-Moulton, a former professional soccer player who represented Croatia on the national team in both soccer and futsal, and now coaches and works towards improving participation in women's soccer in Croatia. Helenna was born in Los Angeles with Croatian and Jamaican roots and moved to Croatia, where she graduated from the University of Zagreb and got her master's degree. In this episode, we're going to hear about her move to Croatia, her career there as a player, and how she's developing Croatian soccer programs now. Helenna, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Hi, well, thanks for the invitation. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, of course. Before we get started, I have something, very important that we have to clear up here. Should we be calling it soccer or football, since we're both from LA?
It comes out as soccer sometimes, but the longer I've been in Europe, the more I turn to calling it football.
Yeah. All right. Well, then in this podcast, we'll call it that. I actually the same thing for me. I think just yesterday was my 2-year anniversary in Croatia, and
Oh,
Nogomet.
a baby still, a baby. I've been here for
Yeah,
11.
11 years you've been here now.
Yep.
Wow. Well, let's talk a little about the beginnings of that. So you have sort of an interesting heritage. Can you talk a little about that and then sort of, growing up?
All right. Well, for starters, my mom is Croatian and my dad is Jamaican, and the both of them met in Los Angeles. So it's an interesting story right off the bat. I was born in Los Angeles, but I wasn't there for very long. Afterwards, we moved to Jamaica, was there for a few years, and then we moved to the US. And I basically grew up then in the US between North Carolina and Florida, lived in Miami, also spent a year in Canada, and then back to Miami before coming to Croatia. So I'd visited Croatia as a child, just like I'd visited Jamaica. But I only started living here after I made a more permanent move once I finished high school. So at
Mhm.
that point, I was already playing for the U19 national team, and I was traveling from Miami to Zagreb and to Croatia to play qualifiers for European and World Cups. And then I guess I was intrigued. I kind of thought, at 18, if not now, when? And then I just kind of took the leap over the pond, as they say, and started living here in Croatia. And things just, came after that little by little.
Uh-huh. That's awesome. Yeah, that's quite the story. A lot to break down here. I want to ask, how did your parents meet, both in Los Angeles? I actually interviewed a few, maybe like 6 months ago, Richard Gruica, and he was born, I forget, but he also had Croatian and Jamaican roots. And I
Oh,
remember thinking,
really?
like, wow, he's probably the only person I'll meet, and then was born in the U.S. or like raised in the U.S. I was thinking, oh, that's probably the only person I'll meet like that.
Well,
But
shout out to Richard right now.
yeah, that's pretty crazy. Yeah, how did your parents end up both in Los Angeles and meeting there?
My mom left Zagreb to go to LA to finish university or an extra university study, and then she started working. And my dad had left Jamaica also for university in the U.S. and then started working, and that's where they met at work.
Hmm. And then so growing up, did you feel sort of one identity more than another, or were you sort of moving around so many different places that you felt a mix of everything?
Honestly, I didn't think about it too much. I loved Jamaica and I still love Jamaica to this day. I love spending time there. I loved growing up there. The US to me was associated more with school because I always had to go to school, but also with football because I played there. And I was in love with my club team. Kendall Soccer Coalition was the name at the time in Miami. And then, that age 14, 15, 16, 17. I was really consumed with that. But I can't say that I've always felt more American or more Croatian or more Jamaican, just kind of, a mix of all of that.
Yeah. Were you surrounded at all by Croatian communities in any of the cities growing up?
Not one bit, not
No,
one bit.
but
Just my mom. used to speak Croatian with me when I was younger, and I kind of rejected it because it's quite a hard language. And I wasn't too interested until I actually started coming here, and then I realized I could use it. And then luckily, since she spoke Croatian with me, I just kind of had an ear for it. And then when I moved here, I learned.
Yeah, it's a very tough language, that's for sure. What were your
Yeah.
thoughts then going into that move? Was that a big decision for you?
Well, maybe since I had moved several times growing up, I wasn't too scared. It was definitely a big jump, but I just kind of, since it was my decision, I felt ready for it. I wasn't, scared off by anything, so it was fine.
When did, as far as football goes, when did you start playing? As a kid?
Yes, around like age 5 in the US. At the time, we were living in North Carolina, actually. And, football is normal for girls in the US. So I'm not entirely sure why I chose football. I just remember playing and not stopping.
And did you always feel a pull towards a professional career in it, or is it just something that, as the years gone by, you said, "Oh wow, I can play this professionally"?
Yeah, more the latter. I wasn't expecting anything. I was just kind of playing and loving it. And then as time went on, I just kept going forward with it.
hmm And so you were playing for Dinamo, for what, 2 years? Was that your first sort of international professional experience,
Yeah,
semi-professional?
I started playing for Dinamo when I moved here to Zagreb, right? Because it was one of the biggest clubs, obviously for men's football, but also for women's football. There are two major clubs here in Zagreb. And I guess it is my first international team because before that I was playing in the US. Um, and now how many years I'd have to kind of trickle back and you know think about how long I was playing. It was more than two because I was doing my bachelor's degree at the time, so I was in Zagreb for 3 years. Then I started playing futsal at that time as well, and I was playing for the national team. And after that, I went to Poland, and I was playing in Poland for Medikonyin for half a season. And then I had decided to do my master's degree, and I came back to Zagreb.
hmm
And then I was playing in Slovenia. I was living in Zagreb and playing in Slovenia for Janica Pomoria.
Oh wow, so you were commuting
Yes.
from how long? How, by train? I know they have a pretty good train line.
Driving,
Yeah, drive. How
I
long is
had
it?
a car. Yeah. About 2 hours and 15 minutes.
Wow. I mean, I guess that's sort of like working and living in LA and going through the worst of that
Uh,
traffic, but
a little bit. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
but definitely unusual in Europe and in Croatia especially to have that sort
Yeah. It was a good club. It still is a good club. And I played for another 2 years, 11v11. And then I stopped with 11v11 football and I continued playing futsal up until 2019.
of. What was the experience like playing for the Croatian national team for the first time?
Well, it's an honor to play for your country. It's kind of hard to explain even. It just felt like you're part of a bigger cause and you're contributing to something bigger. So it's also nice to experience that with other teammates. And really on the field, all you're just doing your best. So you're playing the game, and at that point, you're thinking about the game as much as possible and representing your country as best you can.
And then, so at the same time, you were playing futsal as well for the Croatian national team?
Yeah, well, there in the beginning there wasn't a Croatian national futsal team. That came a little bit later. In 2018 was the first competition for the national futsal team, and I was playing then. So I was playing for Alumnus, it was a men's futsal club at the time with a women's team, and now it's a women's futsal club, and we were playing in the first women's futsal league. And then when the national team was formed, then players from the first women's futsal league were the first to represent their country for that team, and I was part of that.
Wow, so you were on the very first ever squad.
Yes.
Wow, that's pretty cool. What's the difference in terms of, I mean, obviously the playing the field is different in terms of football versus futsal.
Futsal? Oh, everything's different. It's a different game. It's a different game. The ball is smaller and also heavier. The field dimensions as well as the surface is different. The goals are smaller. Obviously, it's not 11v11. It's 5v5. So the movements are different. The tactics are different. At a higher level, it's safe to say that everything is different. It's a different game. At a lower level, futsal is usually recreational.
Mm-hmm. And so do you prefer professionally? Did you prefer playing one or the other, or is it is just two different games for you?
Well, during my career, there was a more professional environment for 11v11. Futsal is still, a growing sport here, and it's hard to say much about the professional futsal environment because it's still at an amateur level. Mm-hmm. So at that time, in order to be more professional, it would have been in the 11v11 game. Now, things are changing with time. Both futsal and women's football here are becoming more and more professional. So for some younger players now, that kind of the answer to that kind of question will be different.
Yeah. Well, clearly futsal is a lot newer in Croatia, but generally speaking, for women's football, what's the status of that in Croatia? Is it popular? Is it becoming more popular?
Yeah, definitely becoming more popular. There's a lot more money going into women's football. So it's really a work in progress. The leagues are becoming bigger, more younger players getting into football, more clubs then competing. All in all, it's still working on mass participation. And then with time, that goes up in a pyramid kind of shape towards the national team.
Mm-hmm. Are you seeing more, I don't know, more media coverage and a bigger push, sort of in the media to push women's football to become, bigger than
Definitely.
it is now?
Definitely. I mean, it could always be more, well, everybody wants more, which is legitimate. All of us want more, and it's good to push for more, but with time, it's getting better.
Mm-hmm. Does the men's team at all support in any way? I mean, I don't know, just any shows of support from I guess the men's teams in Croatia or leagues?
Sure. Men's teams are actually obliged to contribute to women's teams. It's part of a licensing program within Croatian football and the federation. So they have to either have their own teams or contribute to women's football.
Okay. Well, I know you were supporting the men's team. I think I saw that you were in Qatar for this last World Cup. What was that experience like for you?
Phenomenal. I mean, it was Croatia versus Brazil winning in penalties. It's again hard to explain how that kind of experience sticks with you. It was great. It was definitely something I'll remember for a long time.
Yeah, I can only imagine. I mean, for me, that was one of the best experiences of my life, being in Zagreb for the Croatia-Brazil game. And, when we were down 1-0, everyone was so quiet and like you could hear a pin drop, literally. That's the first time I like understood that expression. And then when was it Petkovic, I think, scored that goal, and everyone, it was just so crazy. It was surreal. And
yeah. Just a rush of emotions. Yeah.
That's nuts. Yeah.
Crazy.
The Women's World Cup.
But it's funny because the stadium was filled with Brazilian fans.
Really?
So all of a sudden, there's a saying in Croatia. I'll say it in English, even though it's not the best translation, but there's not much of us, but we're here, and that's kind of what you think of in that moment, because there weren't many of us there in comparison to the Brazilian fans, but you could really feel our energy.
Are you tired of feeling like a stranger in your own home? Do you long for a sense of belonging and community? Then it's time to consider becoming a citizen of Croatia. With Citizen HR, the Croatian citizenship app, you can make this dream a reality. At Citizen HR, we understand the emotional weight of citizenship. We know it's not just a piece of paper, it's a feeling of belonging to a community, a sense of security, and a connection to your heritage. That's why we've made it our mission to make the process of becoming a Croatian citizen as smooth and stress-free as possible. With Citizen HR, you'll have access to experts who will guide you every step of the way. From filling out forms to answering questions, We'll be there to make sure you have everything you need to apply for your citizenship. One user on the App Store, Kate KC, said, "Easy to use and great selection of experts available," and gave us 5 stars. So, if you're ready to take the next step towards citizenship and to find a sense of belonging and security in Croatia, download Citizen HR today. Because at Citizen HR, we believe that citizenship is more than just a legal status. It's a feeling of home. So what are you waiting for? Head over to www.citizenhr.app today. Use the code ALLTHINGSCroatia for 50% off any biography translations you order. Yeah. Is that the Malonasia Alnasima?
Alnasima, yeah.
Yeah.
There you go.
I love that song. Yeah, that's such a surreal experience, I'm sure. Speaking of the World Cup, the Women's World Cup is this summer.
This year.
Right? This year. What are you doing to prepare? Well, before we start talking about that, let me ask you, when did you start coaching and how did that what teams are you coaching for?
I started coaching in 2016 when I finished my UEFA B coaching license. At the time, I was coaching for 2 clubs in parallel, Curva Coach in Croatia. They were launching a women's team, so I helped get that started. And then afterwards, I continued to run that academy, which is also where I am today. Whereas I was also in Zagreb 041, which is a club that promotes equality. And at the time, we were starting up a program to help refugees get integrated into society here in Croatia because there was a refugee crisis. So I was also running that program for them. So I finished the B license in 2016. I've been working as a coach since then. I've also done the A license now. So once I finished the A license, we launched Žena SAVICA, which is a women's football club. So what came out of that female academy from Curva Coaching has now turned into a women's football club here in Zagreb. And those are the teams that I manage and the club that I manage. But I also work with the national team as an assistant coach in the U17 and U19 women's teams.
And do the U17s and 19s play? Do they also have a World Cup? And does that go on at the same time as the professional team?
They have their own cycle of qualifications and tournaments.
And is that coming up this summer as well?
Well, they have qualification. So actually, starting this week, we have qualifications with the U17 national team, and then it really depends what happens after that, whether you qualify or don't qualify. And the U19s have their qualifications at the beginning of April. And those tournaments are every year because in reality, your younger age groups have new players each year, right? As one age kind of someone who is U19 or U17 right now at this time next year might not be able to play for the team, right? Because then they have to go into the next selection. So then for the younger age groups, you have tournaments yearly.
Okay, so you have quite the busy schedule then, managing all of that.
Yes.
Who are some of the powerhouses in Europe as far as women's soccer go? Because I think the U.S. probably has the best women's team, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, if we're talking about the professional level, then yes. The first team, the U.S. are obviously dominant. They won the last World Cup, as is Netherlands dominant, right? Because they were in that final. So you can really, look at the World Cup as some kind of mirror as to what teams and what countries have gone the furthest with women's football and investment in women's football up until now. But European countries are quite high, also there are European Cups, obviously. And now there's going to be a new competition as a Women's Nations League, same as there is for the men's side. So a lot of competitions, which is good because that's really how women's football develops in reality. A lot of countries investing and teams are getting better. So.
Yeah, it's cool to see that the women's football as a whole is increasing in popularity, and as far as tournaments and things like that go. I wanted to ask a little bit about the UEFA Playmakers Disney program. Can you talk a little bit about what that is and how you're involved with that?
Okay, well, UEFA Playmakers is a fun and interactive program for girls between the ages of 7 and 8. That's the target group, and it's meant in collaboration with Disney and Disney movies to attract girls into football, into being active in general, but also with a football. So it kind of gets them animating their favorite characters from favorite movies and interacting with picture books and football equipment. And then in the end, after doing fundamental movement skills and learning about life skills, there's also that football component, which hopefully leads them to fall in love with the game and then continue playing afterwards.
Oh, wow.
Uh, just to completely answer your question, because you also asked how I'm involved. So, ahead of the Croatian Football Federation, I'm the project manager for Croatia. We have 30 centers within the country, and each center is running 20 sessions a year. So 10 sessions or a season, 10 sessions in the spring season, 10 sessions in the fall season, and girls from all over the country are welcome to participate in those sessions.
Wow. So you're project managing for all 20 of those locations, all of Croatia.
30, yes.
Wow. And when did
So we
that?
have people at each center who are, responsible for that center.
How many are in Zagreb?
There are, so we have 5 regions within Croatia, and each region has 6 centers.
Oh, okay. Wow.
So the region of Zagreb has 6 centers from Gorica to Pregrada, and also 3 within Zagreb.
And is this program something that just this year started? Well, I guess 2022 started.
Last year.
And then do you see is there any plans to sort of make that bigger or to expand, or is it too new that, right now you're sort of testing the waters with these programs you
Well,
have?
it's going quite well, actually. There were in the last season around 900 unregistered girls who are participating in the program. So those are all potential players later on if they stay in football. And now we're in the second season, so we're just kind of following along to see how it's going to go, and we'll see what happens in the future. If we can continue, we'll try and continue.
Huh. So it sounds like you've been getting, good feedback, good results from the program so far.
Yeah, well, in women's football especially, you really take all the help you can get. If you can attract, for some clubs, 1 or 2 players, it's meaningful. So the clubs are doing their best. All the ones that are involved are doing their best to attract younger players, because the younger they are when they get involved with football, the more chances you have of them, learning the skills on time and being able to compete later on if they'd like to. And the amount of effort that each club puts in is really a mirror of what they can get back.
Is the program sort of a competitive football program, or is it more just,
Absolutely not. UEFA has done research that has showed that girls love sport, but also football because of a more social aspect than competitions. They like to hang out with their friends. They like to play games. They like to just, interact with other people much more than they really want to compete. So the program written by UEFA in cooperation with Disney is really just about being fun and interactive for them, so that they enjoy the sport. And then as they get older, if they want to compete, the clubs that are associated with the program then have a place for them to compete.
I see. So then the goal is just get more girls in general involved, and then those who
Exactly.
wish to, play at a competitive level can then go on and do that. Are there a lot of
Exactly.
avenues for girls to play competitive football? Younger girls in Croatia? Is there a lot of
A lot of what? Sorry, I didn't hear what you said.
younger girls, say they're 10, 11, older, too old for the program? Is there a lot of teams that they can go play on after that?
Sure, more and more. A lot of these teams are also opening new groups so that beginners can join regardless of their age. So there are more and more options really for girls in any region of Croatia. Just have to reach out. If they reach out, we can always find somewhere for them to train.
Yeah. Well, I'll give you an opportunity now to sort of shout out if there's a website that people can go to, or if you have any social media handles or anything that you want to sort of shout out where people can reach you and reach these programs at.
Yeah, of course. The Croatian Football Federation has a section on the website of the Croatian Football Federation where they can go to the grassroots section and pick UEFA playmakers, and they can register for the program there. And there will be drop-down windows where they can pick what region they are in, and then get information on the closest center. And if you want to share my email, that's also perfectly fine. If anybody wants to contact me, and I can help them find a club or a new opportunity.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll definitely include all these links in the podcast description so people can click on those as well.
Cool.
Helena, speaking back on a personal level, did you have any culture shocks moving to Croatia? Or is there anything now that you miss from, other parts of the world in Croatia?
Not really, but that's mostly because I was introduced to Croatian culture as a kid already, through my mom and through vacations here in Croatia while I was younger. So I can't say that they were culture shocks. But did it take getting used to? Of course, living in a different country. And also there are some Americanisms that are kind of stuck with me that maybe don't work as much in Croatia or in Europe as I might have expected. So in general, it's more of an adjustment than a shock.
Uh-huh. Can you give an example of one of those Americanisms?
Um, let's say financially, US banks function in a certain way and European banks don't function in the same way. So there are some things, I mean, it might be a silly example, but let's say ATMs, ATMs in Croatia have only really now started including the deposit
Hmm.
option where you can deposit money at the ATM, where that's something that in the US has been, just kind of a usual thing at every ATM. So that's just, I mean, it's a silly example, but those are the kind of things where like just certain things function differently there than they do here. But I can't always say that it's better there than it is here. It's just different.
Different. Yeah, yeah, I agree. Yeah, that's an interesting example. I've never thought about that before, but now that I have, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, it's always those things that you don't even think about, like that you just notice all of a sudden, like, oh, this is weird. This is
Yeah, yeah.
not like that back home or back in the US. That's interesting.
But I
Helen,
have a great appreciation for Croatian culture. Really, the people here are very warm. The food is great. I have a liking for homemade food, and America in that sense is a little bit too commercialized and industrialized for me. So, in order to stay away from the processed food, I prefer being here, and that kind of more laid back, I guess, focus in life is also different here than it is in the U.S. So I have a liking for Croatian culture for sure.
you mentioned the food. I just recently learned that a lot of like food that's sold in the US is banned, like due to European Union laws and like certain ingredients and stuff that they put in food in the US, they can't sell that here. And it's
Yeah,
just
just processed. Yeah, I don't like
yeah.
that part. I mean, you can't escape it in the U.S., which I think is ridiculous. But
Mhm. What's some of your
in
favorite?
general, I mean, that those kind of things also happen in Europe. It's not like Europe is exempt, but certain regulations are just a little bit better in that sense.
Yeah, yeah. What's some of your favorite food to eat? Homemade food.
Everything homemade is good for me.
Yeah. Yeah, if it's domachi, then it's good.
Exactly, exactly, exactly.
Helena, I know you're really busy. You have a super busy schedule, but do you have any free time? And is there anything else that you like to do in your free time?
Not very much free time. At the moment, life is consumed with football, whether it's for the federation or it's for Žena Savica or it's some kind of initiative that might be beneficial later on. Everything is about football. So as much as I enjoy it, the downside is that there isn't much free time. But when I do manage to have free time, I like to kind of the usual normal people stuff, hang out with my friends or, relax, watch something on TV or, on Netflix and Disney Plus. The usual, eat some good food, spend time with family, sometimes travel, just the usual kind of uh, things people like to do to settle
Hmm.
down.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Those are nice. Helena, I want to thank you, so much again for coming here on the All Things Croatia podcast. It was really cool to hear
Of
from
course.
you. I hope, what little I can do to, help promote women's football in Croatia and these programs that you're running. I think it's great. Um, and I'm looking forward to, what the future brings for you and for these programs. It sounds like it's already only 1 year in, as far as the Disney UEFA Playmakers Disney program goes.
Hmm.
It's doing good things. So I just want to thank you again for coming on the podcast.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thanks so much for your time too and initiative. I'm always happy to share experiences, especially if it goes towards promoting women's football, because the more the better. And I'm glad to have one more supporter, and hopefully, as this podcast goes live, even more than that.